Hi, folks. This is a really important show. It's the countdown to our freedom. So I want to give you some perspective. I've been doing this for 56 years. Most of it was preparation. I've only been doing shows for a couple of years and only had this channel for a couple of months. But God told me way back when I had my near death experience, I'll hold you till the end when everything is critical, when everything is coming out, and I'll bring you out to deliver a message that opens people's eyes, to tell the truth, the unabridged truth, and nothing but the truth. So please subscribe. You're going to find that the next several weeks is going to be imperatively important. So what we're going to discuss today is we're going to discuss the avalanche of whistleblowers that are coming out that are designed to open our eyes so that we can have the financial reset and so that we can get out from under the slavery of the global financial elite and get our freedom back. And then it goes beyond that. It goes to structurally, what do you and I need to do once the financial collapse comes? Then the burden is on us to do what we need to do to rebuild America, where we can become the nation we were intended to be, that nation high on the hill that all the rest of the world looks to for guidance. And Donald Trump is basically opening that door for us. God is going to bring in supernatural events, and it's going to be amazing. So we're going to go into a highlight of some of the most important whistleblowing stories that have come out within the last month. So with that, let's go to the first slide and let's dig into this. So basically, there it is. It goes deeper than you think. You cannot look at a single newscast and say, I know what it is. You have to have a perspective. And what this is going to do is to give you a big picture perspective of what they've done to enslave us. This is only the beginning of the whistleblowers. The Epstein stuff is going to come out, and other people, Assange is going to come out, and other people are being held in the wings right now. And once we're going to get is a deluge. Timing is everything. Sun Tzu says you have to know your enemy and you have to take advantage of his weaknesses. So what we're going to do, or what the global elite are going to find, is that Donald Trump is executing, along with the White Hats, what I call an atomic bomb, a tsunami of truth that's going to open your eyes. So with that, let's dig into what's been going on for the last month. This is just the beginning of what's coming. Please subscribe. Please share this with your friends. It's critical that you know what's coming. This is go time. So let's go to the next slide. So here's something you need to be thinking about. You need to think about, if we're going to get our freedom, what do we have to have? So when we get it back, we have to address these issues. You cannot have a sovereign nation unless you have honest elections. So we're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks. You have to have sovereign borders. You have to have a sovereign currency. You have to have manufacturing and trade. Now, let me dip into that one a little bit. The saying is that he who controls money controls the world. But the question is, well, where's the money come from? Well, here's where it comes from. It comes from getting access to God's natural resources, to taking the talents of man and manufacturing products to sell them in the global market, which then releases the money that gives us the GDP that allows us to have a government. Now what's happening is that money is being used to basically control all the spheres of influence and keep us in slavery. But once we find out all the things that are happening, we're going to get control of that money, and we're going to get control of those spheres of influence. And that's what you need to know. How do we restore those spheres of influence? And then out of that comes freedom of speech and comes liberty. And we have to look at this in two contexts. We have to look at it as a financial liberation, but we have to look at it as a responsibility to restore America to the foundation stones that created the greatest nation the world has ever seen. And what are those foundation stones? We are a republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And we were a government that had a moral base. We basically had family values, we had Christianity, and we had unity. We have to have all those things come back, and we have to have patriotism. So as we go through this series and we see all the things that they're doing, we'll eventually morph into, well, how do we restore the nation in terms of its ethical foundations? Because if we don't do that, the financial reset will come and go, and we'll just slide right back into where we were. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll break this down further. So what I want to say as we get ready to get into this, they're talking about Hillary right now and what she did in terms of creation, the false narrative of Russia, 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 the Russiagate scandal. But what we really need to recognize is that's the lie. We're going to talk about that. The truth is right here on this slide. It is that the money was coming from China. Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to put Donald Trump into office, but China had the ability to do whatever they want. They had bought our media, they had bought our politicians, and they had all of the resources they needed to influence this election. But guess what? Neither Russia nor China really truly wanted to see Donald Trump get elected, because what they wanted was Hillary to get elected, because Donald Trump was relatively new in politics and he didn't have very many scandals that they could expose except in his personal life. But if you look at Hillary, she would have been the perfect puppet. I mean, you can go all the way back to Arkansas when her husband was governor and the Whitewater real estate scandal. You can go to the 32,000 emails. You can go to Benghazi. You can go to the trail of alleged deaths that were suicides that maybe were more than that, and they would have had the perfect situation. Hillary gets in and basically they puppet her and they move us really quickly down the road. The strategy had been for years and years and years, decades: push, pull. Push us until we wake up and start to resist, then back off and let things calm down, and then push. But when Trump got elected, it surprised the heck out of them, and that started their downfall, because Sun Tzu says you have to know that enemy and you have to take advantage of his weakness. So the weakness that has been exposed is they got in a situation where their timeline was in jeopardy. And what they had to do, excuse me, but my eye is itching terribly. So what they had to do is accelerate their timeline, and that is what is exposing them. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to get down into more detail. So this one compilation slide just says a mountain of things. So who's at the head of the push to give the truth to America? It's none other than Donald Trump. And where does it start? Remember, we have to have voter integrity. And what did he say? From the very beginning, he said, we've got it all. Or speaking of the attempts to steal the election. And what did what happened? Basically, he never got a chance to tell his story. He never got a chance to say, we know where those votes went. We know what was changed and flipped. And so basically, every time he tried to tell his story, the bought and paid for judges that were to hear his pleas for his day in court said no, 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 no. And in the meantime, the deep state, he's been taking it a little at a time, a little at a time, a little at a time. And now with this deluge of whistleblowers that are coming out, he's going to be in a position to literally, completely and absolutely expose the swamp and drain it. And that's when we get back our freedom. So let's look at a high-level overview of what's happening. So look down to the bottom left, and you'll see the whole concept of our fair trade. And I want you to understand, it's not just China. Literally, every major nation in the world has been opposing the U.S. in one way or another. Why? Because they know that the global financial elite who enslave us know that unless they can make America submit, they'll never realize their dreams of a one world government. So we have to understand that sometimes those people that we think are our friends are in fact our enemies, because there are no sovereign nations. All the nations, America, China, all of Europe, are all controlled by the global financial elite. And why? Because as they say, he who controls money controls the world. The global financial elite control the global banking system, and they have bought the politicians, and they bought the teachers, and they bought the media. And so they're the ones puppeting. And so they're all against us, every last one of them, because it's not the nations, it's not the people of the nations, it's the global financial elite who use their money to puppet the politicians and the news media, etc. And then that takes us over to the next graphic. And one of the big things that they've done to drive America into debt is perpetual war. And right now, currently, it is what they have done with immigration. And there's a lot more to that than you are probably aware of. And where we really will start on this, not on this slide, but we'll go all the way back to the Arab Spring and show you how they use the Arab Spring to basically do what they're trying to do to America. They put Europe in a situation where it's now so full of Muslims, and those Muslims have multiple wives and multiple children, that all of Europe is literally losing its identity, and they're passing Sharia law within Europe. And now you see pictures of three individuals, and next to them you see a picture that says cartel. So what you need to know is that basically, oops, one of those pictures disappeared. That's interesting. That's the picture of um, the head of Mexico. So what you need to know is that China, Mexico, and Venezuela are all our enemies, as well as Canada. So as we go through what we do today and in the coming weeks, you're going to find that America is surrounded by enemies in the north and in the south. And if we're going to get our country back and keep our sovereignty, we have to recognize what these people have done and their complicity in the scheme to bring America down so that the global elite can have their one world government. Let's go to the next slide. And now we're going to get into Hillary. And basically, this is where the 2016 coup came in, and what happened. She absolutely had to create the scandal that she created, the lie that she created about Russiagate. Why? Because she was under a lot of pressure, and all the cards were stacked for her to win the presidency, but she was afraid that the suppression of her 32,000 emails on her personal server that had all kinds of classified information was going to cost her that election. So she had to do what they do. Don't look over here, look over there. So basically, she created the distraction called Russiagate, and she hired someone to basically create that dossier full of lies in order to create the impression that Russia was coming in to interfere in this election in order to see to it that Donald Trump was elected. Here's the truth. The last thing that Russia wanted was for Donald Trump to get elected. They didn't have enough dirt on him, but they had all kinds of dirt on her. So what they really did, and what was the narrative from the Central Intelligence Agencies at that time, was that Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to significantly change the election so that it would make Donald Trump be elected. What was really, really happening was they were just going to sit back and let her be elected and then come at her and disclose all the dirt that they have on her. And hopefully she would be their puppet and they would control her. So that's the real story behind Russiagate. That's what Tulsi Gabbard has been disclosing this month, and saying that now they're ready to basically move to the point of bringing prosecution. And so you're going to see her, and then you're going to see Obama, because Obama kicks into this scenario that very instant that he is shocked because Donald Trump got elected. They underestimated no amount of stealing that they had put into the computers, nothing that they had done took into the equation the fact that he was so popular that they couldn't overwhelm the voting system. And so when he got elected, then we moved to the next phase. So let's go to the next slide. And then the narrative changed. Barack Obama called these people in: Bannon, Copper, Rice, Kerry, Lynch, McCabe. Those were his core people, and said, we got to flip the narrative. It's no longer going to be possible to say that Russia did this or did that. We have to change the narrative and say, no, it's not that they had no intent or no capability to put Donald Trump in. We have to say they absolutely had intent and had capability, and this is what they did. And we have to concoct a story that basically tells how Russia colluded to get Donald Trump elected. And so what you see there that's coming out is gonna create a situation where each and every one of those people on that slide are going to be exposed, along with Barack Obama, along with Hillary Clinton. They're going, as Donald Trump has said, and as the people who represent him in his administration have said, these people will be held accountable for what they've done. And they're calling this what? A coup. They're calling it treason. That means get-go. That means possible executions. The truth is coming out. And why is it so important? Because we have to understand, we go back to that very first slide, you do not have a sovereign nation if you do not have a sovereign border and if you do not have election integrity. And I will disclose to you later in this presentation, haven't had a truly honest election for the last 100 years. So memorize those faces. You're going to be seeing a lot more of them. They're going to be in the news cycle and they're going to be indicted. I really believe that we have all the information we need. Donald Trump has had it from the beginning. He just held it so that he could bring it out in a deluge, in a tsunami at exactly the right time. So we build momentum to where the American people's eyes were opened and the division that we have in this country would be wiped away and we would stand united, one nation under God, one people pursuing freedom. That's what's coming, folks. Let's look at January the 6th and the truth behind that. I mean, folks, it was out there from the beginning. Basically, Donald Trump made a speech. And what did he say at the end of it? He said, okay, go and march to the White House and protest peaceably. Peaceably. He didn't say commit insurrection. And let's look back at the events that led up to January the 6th, and we'll see the truth. Basically, Donald Trump does not have control over Washington, D.C. It's not a state. If he wanted to do anything with putting out troops to make sure that there was no insurrection, he had to go to Nancy Pelosi and he had to go to the mayor of Washington, D.C. And he did. And he asked to be able to bring in troops to make sure that there was no incident of any kind. They turned him down. And so right there, those two things tell you the onus is not on Donald J. Trump. This whole insurrection was caused so they could create a story, another false narrative, so that they could get him convicted of insurrection so that he would never be able to run for office again and they would be back within the timeline they wanted. So what we're about to find out is that on January the 6th, there were disruptors in the audience that were put there to basically create what we saw. The actual insurrection was not done by conservatives, by Christians. It was done by people who were paid to go there to cause this to happen. But something happened that they didn't anticipate. Donald Trump knew what they were doing, and he had people in the audience that had their own assignments. Go into the White House. If they actually breached the White House, send his people in and get the laptops of Nancy and Schumer and who else. And so he's got all that information and they know it. And we're just waiting for that to be released. So this is going to be one of the biggest stories that you've ever seen. This is waiting for full disclosure. And I have a prayer that goes along with this. When this comes out, it is my honest and sincere hope that all those poor people who were put in prison as a result of that day, they get released. And basically, I hope and pray that they get full restitution, that no criminal charges remain, and that they are paid financially to compensate for the destruction that caused in their lives, possibly the loss of homes and whatever happened to them. So this is an injustice that has to be corrected. So let's go on down and we're going to see still more of what they've done to us. So we've just got, if we'll go to the next slide, just got the first inklings of what Act Blue was. And I'm going to go back even before Act Blue, and I'm going to tell you about a story that I got inserted in about a year ago. A gentleman by the name of Sean Taylor, who was at the time a deputy sheriff, I think it was in Tennessee, came across a story that he just got inserted in, and it was about money laundering and about trafficking, and it had to do with a lady who was in office illegally because she had given a false address. She didn't live within the district that she claimed she lived in. Anyway, it led him down a rabbit hole, and what he found out was, now let me give you a caveat. I was in real estate for 12 years, and I eventually had my own small real estate firm, so I know what I'm about to talk about. So what happens is when you buy a new home, there's a big, huge magnifying glass that goes on that transaction, and you have to get the title cleared. You have to see if there's any liens against the property, and you have to get the mortgage company involved, and everybody's looking over all those records. But once that transaction is done, then they're ripe for fraud. Here's what they do. This is the telltale that tells you that this is a money laundering operation. These people with their vast amounts of money come into an area and they buy a number of homes. And the key is they buy them with cash. And then they let some time pass. And then they come in and they buy another block of homes. But here's what they do. Those homes are bought substantially above the fair market value, which means now there's money in the slush fund to start their money laundering. And then time goes on. And if you've ever bought a house, you'll find out, I'm sure, in almost 90% of the instances, whatever bank or institution you put your loan out with sells it within no time. And so this is where the scam comes in. This is where the money laundering really gets egregious, into the trillions of dollars, to a worldwide scheme to basically collect trillions of dollars to use for nefarious purposes. So what they do is they basically transfer that title over and over and over and over again. And every time it transfers, it's at a higher rate. So what he saw was egregious. He saw houses that were sold for $150,000 that several years later were on the books in the millions of dollars. And all that money was going to fund election fraud, to fund groups that would be protesting and burning our cities down. Anything and everything you can think of, the money was going out to basically create absolute chaos within this country. So that leads us to Act Blue. So what happened in Act Blue is very simple. What they did is they wanted their trillions to spend to buy elections and to create absolute chaos within this country. And so what they did is they figured, if we take a lot of money and it's fraudulent, they're going to catch it. But here's what they did. They had a whole list of dead people, a list of older people, and they basically rigged their computer system so that it looked like these people were making multiple donations to the Democratic funds, little bitty, teeny tiny donations that mount up in the millions and billions and trillions of dollars. That's Act Blue. That's what has been discovered now. And that it is the follow-up to what happened with Sean Taylor. And so now we're seeing that is a form of election theft, because they have 10 times more money to spend than the Republicans do, because of all the illegal money that is flowing into their system through the real estate system and through tampering with the voting rolls and making it appear that contributions are being made that were never made. So how this came to be, that we understood what it was, is somebody caught what they were doing, and they said, we got to validate this. And so they sent investigators out of the field, and they took some of these files of these people who were making repeated small donations and said, did you donate? Did you donate? Did you donate? Did you donate? And the answer was consistently no, nope. I didn't give any money to the Democratic Party. And that's what we've just been informed of is Act Blue. And if you look down at the bottom, we're not going to get into this today, but there's a link that you can copy, and you can go, and it tells you exactly where to go to get the most important information about Act Blue. So let's go down, and I'm just going to unravel this and take you deeper and deeper and deeper so that you understand it's not one scandal, but it's multiple scandals, and it's not at one point in time, but it's over decades. So let's go to the next slide. And you're going to see what really is going on in Washington, the swamp that Trump is trying to expose. Basically, he has a detailed plan for how to restore America financially, morally, ethically, and in every other way, and make, as he said, America great, make America greater than ever. So what do the Democrats have as opposing that? They have nothing. They have no plan to in any way, shape, or form make America more financially solvent or to get rid of the division. All they have a plan to do is to obstruct Trump. And so here's some facts that you need to know. Schumer boasts that Democrats have, listen to this, appointed 235 liberal judges to obstruct Trump and his Make America Great agenda. So now you wonder why he couldn't get his charges of election theft into the courts, why he was obstructed every time he turned around, why he couldn't even get gang members that had come into this country illegally who were murderers, basically put on an airplane and sent out of this country because the judges interfered. So the next thing that we find out here is the Democrats have filed, are you ready? Over 165 lawsuits to obstruct Trump. So they control the majority of the people in Washington, both Republicans and Democrats. They control the judges, they control the corporations, they control the banks. He who controls money controls the world. So we're seeing that it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And they, through their money, they buy anybody they have to buy in order to forward their agenda to collapse the United States. And what's it, collapse the United States, to bring in their global one world government and bring the people to heel under a worldwide dictatorship. And then they can step up what they've been doing to us, that we're beginning to find out. They've been poisoning us. They've been killing us. It's been right out in front of our eyes. If you go to the Georgia Guidestones, it says clearly the agenda was to reduce world population to 500 million. If you go to the UN documents, you find Agenda 21, Agenda 30, Agenda 50, and you find out that their objective was to reduce the population to 1 billion because us useless eaters were ostensibly consuming too many of their valuable resources, which takes us into another scandal that's going to be exposed in the next few months, and those are the lies behind the new Green Deal and the Paris climate treaty is being just torn apart and exposed. But that's for another day. Let's go to the next slide, and we're going to see yet more of what they've done to basically oppose Trump and basically drive America into utter chaos and utter financial collapse. So it starts with the open borders. I mean, that's ridiculous what they did. Basically, they came in and said, well, there's nothing we can do. And the people poured in by the millions. But I've done shows on this. And what it was funded by our government. It was funded by NGOs, which are charitable organizations, supposedly. It was funded by the UN, and it was funded by scams like Act Blue. And they basically, think about this, these were not caravans that just arose out of nowhere. These people were contacted. They were given instructions as to how to come, instructions as to what to say when they got here. They were given clothes. They were given food. They were given transportation. This was nothing but an invasion. This was a national security issue of paramount importance. And what happened? The second Trump got in his second time, that border was sealed up. He put troops on the border, and he gave notification to Mexico and to all of South America, you will not come to this country. There are consequences. And the border dried up. Democrats insist on counting non-citizens on the census. So let's go back to his first term. And he had a simple request. It was time for the census. I want to add one question to the census. Are you a U.S. citizen? Now, why in the world did he want to do that? But first, they said no. That went all the way to the Supreme Court, which is also compromised because of blackmail and because of possibly being bought and paid for. But the Supreme Court came back and said, nope, we will not put that question in. Well, here's what you need to know. The Constitution says that we have to have a census every 10 years. But what it actually really says is within each 10-year period. So he is attempting to get a census conducted but before the midterm elections. And why is he wanting to do that? Because if they come in and they protect these millions, there's up to possibly as many as 20 million illegal immigrants that have come in. And where do they send them? To specific locations. They send them to sanctuary cities. They send them to blue states. What are they trying to do? They're trying to impact the census because it has the ability to impact the number of representatives that that state gets. And it has the ability to give that state more money because the money that's given out is based on the population. So what's behind it all? It is to basically create a situation where they don't have to steal an election the day up. They don't have to steal election during the election cycle. They can steal it with the census because they can change the census so dramatically that they can take a state that's red and flip it purple, or a state that's red and flip it blue. And they can basically make it so that we're not going to see another conservative Republican be elected, period, because of what they've done with the census. And then we go down to the next one, gerrymandering. A lot of people probably don't know what that is, but when America was founded, it was broken up into nice rectangular blocks that contained people that were all in a geographic area, which therefore faced the same issues. And those were called our congressional districts. So what they've done is something called gerrymandering, where they come in and take a look at that, and they look at the population base, and they said, we redraw that, and we can catch this little portion, this little pocket that's filled with blacks, and this little pocket that's Hispanics, and this little pocket that's poor people. We can create a beautiful Democrat voting base, and we can steal elections. So what happened in Texas recently? The Texas governor was coming against that. He was going to do his own redistricting, his own gerrymandering to restore things back to where they really belonged. And so what did the Democrats do? They up and got on a plane and flew to Chicago, but they were forced to come back. So this is going back well before any election. They're trying to take it away from us so that finally they get to a point that the Democratic Party will win every election. We have to stop it, and we're going to stop it. And the truth is what sets us free. All of this is coming out. Now let's go to the next slide, if you would, please. And this takes us to what's happening in Venezuela and why Trump is doing what he's doing. But I think before I get into that, I want to go to Mexico, and I want to go to Canada, and I want to go to Greenland, and I want to go to Panama, and I want to tell you what's happening in the big picture. There's a geographic realignment occurring that's coming because of decentralization and de-dollarization. And so what we're seeing is trade is leaving China, and a disproportionate amount of it is staying within the Asian realm because of proximity. And so what you're seeing now we're going to get a lot of that trade from China. We've got $10 trillion committed to build factories here in the United States. But if you look at what's going on over in Asia, the power is shifting from the West over to the East. And 80% of the world's population is over in the East. So if Trump doesn't get control of our hemisphere, we're going to be in trouble. So here's what he has to do. Let's take it from the top to the bottom. Why is Greenland so important? Why is he putting a stake in the ground and saying we have to have Greenland? There's two reasons. One, in case we lose control of Panama, because China now has ports on both sides of the Panama Canal. And so we have to have a transit system, an efficient transit system to get to Europe and to get to the Middle East. So we have to keep Panama open. So that's why going way back, they took Noriega out in a surgical strike and basically made sure that leader, who was nothing more than the head of a cartel, was taken out. So now what we have to do is we have to make sure we have an alternate route, and that's up through the Arctic Circle, that's up past Greenland. And so that's one of the reasons that he is fighting so hard to get control of Greenland. But there's another reason, a reason that most people don't know. My father worked building Thule Air Force Base back when it was built. And underneath it, they were building tunnels that I think it's Denmark who controls Greenland, that government didn't know about. And they were putting missile silos in all over the place under the ice in Greenland. And if China or Russia were to get in there, oh my God, Trump just absolutely cannot have that happen. Now let's go down to Canada, and we need to understand the history of Canada. Basically, Canada was a colonial colony, just like America was, but unlike us, they didn't fight a war and get their independence. They're still controlled by England. They're still a fossil, whatever the word is, vassal, I think it is, of Britain and of the colonial empire. And they even have communist Chinese troops stationed there. And if we think they're our friends, there's nothing further from the truth. The people are our friends, but the government is not. So we have to understand that we're not only facing an enemy on our southern border, but we're facing an enemy on our northern border. That's being addressed. And now let's go to Mexico. And basically what happened when Donald Trump came in the first term, he simply contacted, just like he always does. This was basically use the leverage that you have. And so he went to Mexico and he said, we're going to put massive tariffs on you if you don't allow immigrants that come in here that we kick out to stay in Mexico, and if you don't put your military on the border. Well, that didn't stop the flow, but it certainly slowed it down. And so we had to put leverage on Mexico. So what we need to understand is the government of Mexico, like so many other governments, have been compromised. It's really largely controlled by the cartels. So now what is he doing? He's basically declared all the cartels in Mexico, Latin America, and South America as terrorist groups. And what does that give him? That gives him the authority to go into those nations and make surgical strikes to take the cartels out, because he understands what they're doing. If we go back in history, we see the precursor to what's being done right now, what they did, what the colonial powers did, Britain in particular, to China a long, long, long time ago, which led to the creation of two wars, is they inflicted it with an opium plague. And they finally had to basically have two wars. And finally, they did something we never do here in this country, but they raided all the opium dens, took the people out into the country and killed them and buried them. So basically, that's how significant it is that we have this opium, this fentanyl coming into our country to create the mass murders that it's creating. There's over 100,000 people who die each year now from fentanyl. So he has to get control of that, which means he has to take the cartels out. So he's now got drones flying over Mexico, I'm sure, figuring out the targets, the locations. And I'm sure that in the coming weeks and months, we're going to see surgical strikes against those cartel operations in Mexico. Now let's go down to Venezuela. And what's in Venezuela is even more important, because Trump understands that Venezuela, the leader of Venezuela, Maduro, was not elected. He understands implicitly that that election was stolen. He understands that they created Smartmatic and it had a chip in it that allowed them to manipulate the votes. And then that's gone out and is under a number of other different names of computer systems. But what he knows and what he's going to expose is that through what was done in Venezuela, ultimately it spread out, and not only did it cause the theft of the U.S. election, but in total it cost 71 other nations plus the United States to have unelected people put in office so that they could have what? They could have control over the transition of the world into their one world government. This is huge, and it's all coming out. And so Donald Trump has put a $50 million reward on this man. And if you look at what he's done in the past, when he said he was going to go in and drop bunker bombs on Iran, he did it. When he said he was going to drive the mother of all bombs on Iraq, no, it wasn't Iraq, it was Afghanistan. He did it. So when he says he's going to take Maduro out, he will. And so there's a whole fleet of ships off the coast, and they've already announced some huge, huge drug takedowns. And I don't know what they're going to do, but they've got amphibious capabilities. They got 4,000 troops, one way or the other. Either they'll go in with a SEAL team or they'll just send in drones. But I can guarantee you, Donald Trump is committed to taking this regime out, and all of the cartels in all of Mexico and Latin America and South America will be taken out, because he understands that we have enemies at our northern border and our southern border, and they're inflicting us with absolute war through the immigration of 20 million people into our country, through an army of people who are military-age men embedded within our country to create insurrection from within our borders. And history tells us that it is very, very rare that a major nation is ever taken over by an attack from the outside. First, it has to be weakened from the inside. And it was Kennedy who said that no nation has ever become communized unless it was first destroyed from the inside. So that's what is happening into America. And so with that, we can go on. That's what's happening in our hemisphere, folks. And you're going to get more and more and more and more on this. And you're going to understand that we are at a critical tipping point. We absolutely have to get rid of the enemy at the gate and the enemy within. And that means more than just the illegal immigrants waiting to create insurrection. That means all of those that are being controlled within the 8 spheres of influence. That means our banks. That means our corporations. That means our politicians. That means our schools. That means on and on and on it goes. That means the media. All of that has to come down. And the only way it comes down is if we take their money. And so Trump has seen to it that insurrection, national emergencies were passed that allows him to take the assets of those who are enemies. And with that, we will financially break them. They're trying to financially break us. Get ready, folks. This is going to shock you. We haven't had an honest election in 100 years, and I'm going to walk through the tell on each one of these presidents that tells you that they were in fact bought and paid for, or they were blackmailed. But in either event, they were not operatives of the American people. They were operatives of a global financial elite. And starts with McKinley. That's that first picture. And McKinley was running against William Jennings Bryan, and there was a philosophical difference between those two campaigns. McKinley was for big business. Bryan was against. And so what did that do? That shook up the three most powerful, wealthiest men in this country, Rockefeller, Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan. And they got together and said, oh, my God, we got to get McKinley elected. So they took all their money, all their power, all their influence, and they, in fact, got him elected. And then the global financial elite had an aha moment. They said, oh, my God, we can elect anybody. If we can elect a president, we can elect a congressman, a senator, anybody in local government. We can put people in the military. We can put people in the media. We can basically control the world through money. And that takes us to Wilson. And it's 1913 and it's Christmas. And most of Congress is off on vacation, and they call a special session and they come in and they have a vote that they know would never, ever pass if there were not a vacation occurring. And they passed what? The Federal Reserve Act, the third central banking system that has inflicted us with all of the debt that is threatening the sovereignty of this nation. Then let's go over to Franklin, and it's World War II. And we've been convinced to come into the war because America, you will come out of this the wealthiest, most powerful nation in the world, because the war will be fought in Europe. It won't be fought in America. You'll be able to sell trillions of dollars of ammunitions and war supplies. And when it's over, you'll be able to send your BlackRock and other things in and rebuild Europe in what was called the Marshall Plan, and you will be the unequivocal, most powerful nation in the world. And what happened after that war was over? We were given the status of world's reserve currency, and in fact, that prophecy came true. That was what happened. So what happened? What did this man do that was this tell? He sent warships into the war zone, hoping that an incident would occur. He saw to it that embargoes were placed against the sale of iron and of oil to Japan. Remember, Japan has virtually no oil. And he made it so that Japan had no choice except to attack us, but they needed a target. So he went to three different admirals and said, I want you to park the Seventh Fleet in Hawaii where you didn't probably say it, but where the Japanese could come in and attack us. And that would give us our provocation to come into the war, because we absolutely want it to look like they forced us. They were the aggressors, when in fact, it was him who laid out an 8-point plan to accommodate them so they could attack us so we could go into the war. And then we go to Vice President Johnson. And finally, 70 years later, the truth is coming out. That man was involved in the assassination of Kennedy, as well as was the military industrial complex, as well as was the mafia, as well as was our central intelligence agencies, as well as the Fed, because Kennedy was taking actions that threatened all of those institutions. So they got together and took him out. That's the truth. It's now 70 years later, finally coming out. And then we go to Nixon, and we all know he got involved in a scandal because he had operatives that broke into the opposition's what would you call it, their election centers, and they got caught. And so his assignment effectively rolled over to Carter. And what happened now is they stepped back and they said, we made America great because it served our purpose at the time, but now America's too strong. We have to weaken America. And so what Carter's assignment was, along with Mitt Romney, was to basically bring China into the World Trade Organization, giving them preferential treatment as a third world nation, and basically cede power from the United States to China by creating intentionally losing trade agreements. That's called NAFTA. And there's probably one other picture I should have had up here, and that would be Clinton, because Clinton is the one that actually signed the NAFTA agreement, even though it was initiated under Carter. Then that takes us to Bush. And there's so much truth coming out on 9/11. There was something called PMAC that was passed over a year before 9/11. And what was it? It was the entire game plan for the war. It said that the military industrial complex, have three objectives, and they can all be realized if we go to war. They wanted to get rid of people who were hostile to the America hegemony agenda. So what that mean? They had to take out Saddam Hussein. They wanted the control of oil, so they had to get rid of Saddam Hussein. And they wanted a larger military budget, which they got, which was $1 trillion increase in the budget. All of that was accommodated by the false flag event that was called 9/11, and it was propagated to drive us into debt. So instead of going in and doing a surgical strike, which is what Trump does, he made an announcement the next day: we're going to have a war. It's going to be a generational war lasting 20 or 30 years. And we came out of that war having won nothing, but having lost about $16 trillion. And then that takes us to the man that I believe is the most evil of them all, Barack Obama. And he basically, we're about to find out that that birth certificate was fraudulent, just like Trump said from the very beginning, and that he was just like all these other men. He was selected, he was financed, he was groomed, and he was placed into office. He did not win that election. Most of these people would not have won the elections that they won or been placed in the positions they were if it was not for what the global financial elite were doing to manipulate the system. But he was involved in basically creating a strategy to drive America into an unmanageable debt through unlimited amounts of entitlements. And so the red badge of courage that he holds is that in his term, he took America deeper into debt than any of the 43 presidents that preceded him, racking up a wonderfully huge $10 trillion addition to our national debt. Those people all are criminals. They're all going to be exposed. And maybe some of them have already been taken to Gitmo. I don't know. But as the truth comes out, all these men are going to be exposed and justice will be done. And that takes us to the final person, the person who they placed in because they knew they could puppet him, because they knew he wasn't mentally capable. And that is Biden. And so that leaves one picture. That leaves a picture of Donald J. Trump, the only man in this list that couldn't be bought, that was too wealthy to be bought, that had for decades talked about what was being done to bring America to healed and promised that he would come in and make America great again. All of these scandals are being exposed. And when they do, it's going to create a tsunami of truth that's going to cause the American people to turn their backs on the global financial elite, to turn their backs on the Democratic Party, to turn their backs on the rhinos that are in the Republican Party, and take back this nation and get our freedom. And then we have to go into the process of restoring America to what it was in the first place. And that is a nation that was based on godly principles, on moral principles, on patriotism, and on family. That's all going to happen. But what it requires is that you, the American population, get informed and be prepared to stand up so that we don't have a civil war, so that we stand down and allow Donald Trump to do what he needs to do to basically drain the swamp. And he's preparing. And look at what's happening. This is a surgical strike in the process of occurring. So he's put troops in Washington, and it's just a logistic foothold. And then he's putting troops in cities all over the country, just a foothold. But then he's got a strike force that's ready, so that if anything happens, if basically a terrorist attack occurs or uncontrollable riots occurs, he can immediately dispatch troops and put it down and quell it, so we don't have the things that happened when cities were burned to the ground and the Democrats stepped back and did nothing. So Trump is preparing for full disclosure and to take back control of the money and to make America great again. And his great big beautiful bill, if you haven't seen that, I've done it. It is absolutely packed with all of the things that we need to have in order to do just exactly that. Let's go to the next slide. We'll go over this one a little quicker. And basically, war is good news for the corrupt business people, the people who want to control us, because it drives nations into debt. And before this nation ever existed, they learned the power of inflicting war upon nations. It was the 100-Year War between France and England went bankrupt. And they went to the Rothschilds, the wealthiest family in Europe at the time, and they said, "Can we borrow money?" And the Rothschilds said, "Sure. Well, we got one little video, teeny tiny little requirement. You have to let me print your money for perpetuity, and I get to charge you interest." And that was the inception of the fiat debt system that we're in now. And so they then knew immediately, we can cause wars, we can create false flags, drive nations into debt, fund both sides, financially collapse them, and force them into a central banking system where they then become basically controlled. And what was it? It was Kennedy who said, "No nation has ever fallen to communism unless it was taken down from the inside." And how do you take a nation down? Through finances. You financially collapse them. And so that is the role of war. And basically what we see is the intelligence agencies, the NGOs, military industrial complex have all been weaponized against us, along with Congress and along with the judges. There are multiple entities out there that are paid in order to do nothing but bring America to collapse, because the global financial realize they're not going to get their dream of a one world government until they collapse America. But I got news for you. We're winning. Donald Trump was brought in and he was recruited by 200 plus generals in order to come in and be the brand to basically wake the American people up and to bring the truth out in this deluge that's been waiting. So we're going to have a tsunami of truth, and all of the corruption is going to be released. And when that happens, we're going to get our freedom. So now let's go to the biggest scandal that you've never, ever heard of. Let's go to the next slide, and it's called Operation Gladio. And I bet you there's not 1 in 1,000 people out there that have ever heard this term, but it is heinous beyond imagination. So remember, their strategy is to create a false flag, drive the nation in the world, bankrupt them, and then get control of them so that they're no longer sovereign nations, but they're puppeted nations. And so basically that takes us, I'm going to pick this story up at the end of World War II. So we came out of World War II, the Allies were victorious. They said, well, we've just lost our biggest lever. We don't have a war going on. So we have to create a situation where we can create chaos forever until we collapse the world. And so they created Operation Gladio. And what was it? They said, we are now going to put people in every major nation in the world with the intent of basically organizing insurrection within those nations, i.e. terrorist groups. So the CIA got involved, and MI6 got involved, and Mossad got involved, because remember, they're all puppeted, and basically they created all of the terrorist groups that we see that have caused so much chaos around the world. So let's go to the first major thing that we saw in 1953, and what's become one of our biggest enemies, which is Iran, basically had massive amounts of oil. And they had an agreement with the British firm where they had sole access to the oil in Iran. And what happened is they elected a democratically elected leader. And he said, we're nationalizing those oil fields because we get virtually nothing out of it. We send our crude oil out, we don't refine it, and we get pennies on the dollar. And so the British went through a panic, and they went to Eisenhower and said, you've got to do something. We've got to get back control of the oil. And so basically, a man that I really kind of respected did something that I definitely did not respect. He joined forces with England, and they created a coup in Iran. And basically they took back the oil, and then they put in their puppet, the Shah of Iran, who basically went back to the same old policies, and the people were basically suppressed, and they came to hate the Shah. And that led us to what we saw under Carter's administration with the hostages. And that then led to the Ayatollahs coming in, and to the regime that comes in that has inflicted ironclad Sharia law upon Iran. So that's That's the kind of stuff they do. Then let's go over and let's look at South America. And throughout all of South America, they have had rebel activity over and over and over. And most of the governments there are largely controlled by the cartels, and Trump knows that. And so that's why he has declared all the cartels in Mexico, Latin America, and South America as terrorist organizations, giving him the right to go in and make surgical strikes to take those drug traffickers and human traffickers out, and finally give back autonomy to those countries so that they can have freedom along with America. And then we go to 9/11, and basically 9/11 was a false flag event. I worked building skyscrapers going through college, and I worked with thermite, and I know very well what it takes to bring a building down. I'm telling you, those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition, and the purpose was to take us into a war, to drive us into collapse. That initiated what Bush said immediately, saying we're going to go into a war that's generational. But now here's what you need to understand. That led to the Patriot Act, and you need to understand what happened. The Patriot Act was negotiated by Republicans and Democrats and laid on the desk for signing. And at 3:45 in the morning, Bush had it removed and had a different version laid that was written by the global financial elite. And what did it do? It basically created a situation where the American people had unprecedented surveillance. And I need you to understand, go back and do some homework. It was modeled after something called the Enabling Act, which was what brought Adolf Hitler to power and let him become the Fuhrer. So basically, it was just a repeat of what they did to bring Hitler into power. And then that takes us to the last thing that I'm going to talk about here. All of this is under the umbrella of terrorism, under what was called Operation Gladio. And that takes us to the Arab Spring. And something was happening. If you look at the presidents that have been assassinated in this country, if you look at Lincoln, he wanted the greenback. If you look at Kennedy, he basically had issued silver certificates. If you look at Reagan, he was proposing a gold-backed system. They tried to kill him, and then he backed off. If you look at McKinley, he was proposing gold, and so they killed him. And if you look at Trump, they made multiple attempts to kill him. So what parallels that was happening in the Middle East is that Libya, under Gaddafi, he had done amazing things for that nation. He built an underwater river so that he could regreen the deserts. He had social welfare programs that were bar none. Basically, there were no taxes because of the oil revenue, and people had free health care. They loved him, but they had to do what they always say. First, you have to besmudge a person. You have to basically create them as a horrible, horrible dictator. Then you can take them out. So that's what they did. And why? Because he had the audacity to want to create a pan-African gold-backed currency, and they weren't ready for it yet because they weren't ready for the financial fiat system to collapse. So they had to take him out, and in the meantime, they might as well take Saddam Hussein out because he was offered the same deal that Saudi Arabia was offered on oil, and he said no. So to do that, they had to go in and take over all of South Africa, all of North Africa rather, and the Middle East, and create absolute chaos. And then that gave them another opportunity. That was Syria. They had full-fledged civil war in Syria, and almost 6,000 immigrants immigrated to where? To Europe. And this has a parallel over what has happened in the last 5 years with our immigration into the United States. Basically, when those Muslims go into Europe, they have multiple wives who have many, many, many children. And the whole game plan was to go in and outbirth the Europeans so that within a generation, the identity of the French and the Italians and the Spanish would all be wiped out. The majority population would be Muslim, and they would then bring in Sharia law, and Europe would have fallen. They're doing something very similar to that with the invasion from Mexico, from South America, from all over the world into the United States. But Donald Trump is absolutely committed to sending those people back to where they came from. And we're going to do a show in the coming weeks, very soon, on Nasara. And what we're going to find out is the answer is to get them back to their own country and then create a situation where the cartels are taken out, where they're legitimate governments, and where opportunities are created for those nations that are now suppressed through Western hegemony to actually join the rest of the world and have economic parity. But that's a story for another day. I have one slide yet that will address it slightly. So let's go on down to the next slide. And that was Operation Gladio. So that brings us to an end for today. I very, very ardently urge you to buy this book, because it's the time that God said way back when I started my journey. He said, this is going to be a lifetime endeavor for you. I'm going to basically have to have you study your entire life to get prepared, but head knowledge isn't going to be enough. I'm going to have you travel all over the world at strategic points in time. I was in Europe when they formed the European Union. I was in China just before and during Tiananmen Square. I was in Canada to see socialized medicine be birthed, etc. And you're going to have to change jobs regularly. So I want you to know, most of your life is going to be preparation. I will bring you out in your elder years when your hair is salt and pepper at the critical tipping point. You'll be like a runner in a relay race, and you get that final baton, and your goal is to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, to disclose things that other people will not disclose. But what I'm getting at is, we are now where we have to bring unity to this nation. And to do that, you have to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And it's in that book. So we need you to get the truth, to buy that book. And when the time comes that we're ready to take all of these people down that were involved in all of those things that we've just discussed, you're either going to be participants, or you're at least going to stand down and allow it to happen and not be part of the insurrection that threatens the integrity of this nation and the integrity of the entire world. We will get back our sovereignty, as will all the nations of the world, and we will come to a period where the financial system, the fiat system that enslaves us, is gone. Control of the money will be taken away, and we will basically then be left. And this is where you need this book, with understanding as to how to rebuild this nation and the world, because basically this book tells you what made America great, which is essential. How they've taken it away, which is what we're talking about now. How we're going to get it back, which is what Trump is orchestrating, and how we keep it. And all that requires that you have knowledge, that you have the truth that's been suppressed and hidden from you, and you've been brainwashed. Well, you're now about to get a giant brain enema, and you're going to get the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But you have to be involved, and you have to take just one simple ask from me. Buy this book and read it, and when you're done, pass it on to somebody who doesn't share your values, so that maybe we can get another recruit onto the side of the fight to save this world. So with that, thank you. Stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of very, very important stuff coming up in the next weeks, and we're going to disclose more and more and more and go deeper and deeper and deeper. So please, please subscribe, and please share this video with everybody that you know. Now is the time. This is the last and final battle where Sun Tzu says we're on death ground. Whoever wins this is going to control the world. And you better darn well be hoping that it's the white hats and that we take down the global financial elite, because I want to remind you, what they want to do is commit genocide and kill most of us. And they want to enslave the few that they allow to live. So if we win this battle, and we will, and we are winning it, then we're going to get unparalleled peace, and we're going to find out that we have financial prosperity, and we have an opportunity to not be debt slaves, to not be chained to a job, but actually have an opportunity to get to know our kids and our wives and our neighbors and our friends, and pursue personal pursuits that will basically allow the people of the world to move into a process of spiritual uplifting and basically enlightenment that will change the entire world. Please subscribe. See you next time.